Welcome back to Questions with Crocker with Dr. Crocker and my husband, Shane.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
We're a little gun shy right now, to be honest.
We are still learning the actual technical process of recording podcasts. And today, one of the cameras wanted to just not be bright at all. And I looked like I was in a cave, and you looked wonderful on camera. We had to adjust that. It only took 5 minutes.
I think it's fixed.
I
think we're recording.
It felt like eternity.
Yes.
So luckily, we have Harrison who edits these. He's amazing from King Media. So he will make it work for us and clean it up the best he can. But I am very excited about today's episode. We are going to talk about something that I think is really important to talk about in veterinary medicine. I actually talk about it at conferences a lot. And I won't make too much of a teaser. We're going to talk about creative scheduling and get into that here in just a little bit. But first, you doing okay?
Yes.
I am really excited because who visited us today at the vet clinic?
Oh, our builder.
Our builder.
Remodeler.
Yes. Our contractor. Who is amazing. And we have been talking to him for a while about our project and our ideas. And it finally feels like it's happening, which I know, listen, we built a house and I know how much will go wrong in this process. I understand that. But just the idea of starting some demo and doing some things is, I don't know, it kind of lights a fire under me a little bit.
I think his exact words were, whoa, y'all are going to put a lot of money into this.
Is that what he said?
Yeah.
I didn't walk around with you guys because I was working and seeing patients. So I was making money so we can pay for the actual renovation.
Sounded like you need to double up.
Yes. But it's been really fun going through the renovation process and the plans. And I think what has helped us along the way is we've actually shown the plans to a couple people who were practice owners. We showed them to Dr. Gary Marshall, who is a cat veterinarian, and he gave us some great insight into just ways to structure.
Great changes because of his suggestions.
We did. We changed some things.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. I'm sure those would be very cheap to implement.
We had to pay a little fee, but it'll be well worth it. And he did say that I should go with the nicer kennels that, have the
Thanks
lights,
again, bud.
have the heating. I just think it is great aesthetically if things look nice, but if they also work really well, then it's worth the little bit extra money. You're rubbing your face.
Yes.
Okay, so we need to change topics quickly.
Probably, quickly.
Okay, so a topic you like talking about. How's your golf game going?
Let's change subjects again. It's not good. It is hot and not good.
Well, okay, so why don't you tell everyone, though, what did we do for your birthday recently?
We played golf.
We did.
That was a lot of fun.
As a family with our 11 and 7-year-old. And I will be honest, I had low expectations for our children because it was 110 or so.
Hot, yes.
Yes. But we had carts and drove around. You were with our daughter. I was with our son. They putted a little bit. And not to toot my own horn, I feel like I played better than you thought I would for how long I go between actually playing.
Agreed.
I have some skills.
Yes.
And our son decided that he needed to learn how to drive the golf cart, which if you're listening, this is a hypothetical.
Didn't really happen at Trophy Club.
At the golf course. But he sat there on my lap to steer. And I'm telling you, this kid, his confidence, just when I think it can't be any more than it is, we're literally 30 seconds into him steering the golf cart, not even using the pedal steering. And he looks at me and he's like, I'm nailing this.
There's no lack of confidence in anything he does.
As he said that, it's like an extreme motion, to turn. And he's like, man, Mom, I'm doing great. And I honestly don't want him to lose that ever. No. So I told him that nailing it might have been a little much, but definitely he was doing well. And so it was really, really funny. But he was cracking me up with the whole thing. So that was fun. Happy birthday to you. Another year, another trip around the sun.
35. Feeling
great. Feeling great.
Yeah.
No aches or twinges or anything going on. All right. So speaking of that, one of the reasons that we can go golf with our kids in the middle of the day as business owners and people who both have a lot going on is because we have really structured our jobs and our lives to be flexible. And I think that leads into a question I get really commonly.
Also, recording a podcast at 10:25 at night.
Okay, but I'm a night owl.
Yes.
And we are on a little bit of a time crunch because we had a couple technical malfunctions. And so we're having...
To probably like 5 podcasts that have not been released.
Yeah. We had a couple we recorded that didn't actually get recorded. Actually, let me double check that I'm actually recording. It looks right. It looks like the button's going, things are going along. So we're doing great. So anyways, I talk a lot on social media about creative scheduling because I think it is a very interesting concept. And I think it's something that, again, our industry struggles with a little bit because it's easier to just say everyone has a schedule and we're going to continue that. And so I want to get a little bit into creative scheduling, the value of it, and also why I think it's so important. So first off, the main reason I think you should consider it from a practice owner standpoint is for hiring purposes.
Yes.
If you look at our industry demographically, you have more women, you have people who are parents in general, men and women, and you have people that also just have a lot of things that they want to do outside of the hospital that maybe don't fall into a normal schedule. And so I think being able to offer flexibility to everyone, not just people with kids, but everyone, is really beneficial when you are looking to hire and you're talking to people about the way your practice is structured. And I think culturally, it also shows that you really value your team and what they care about.
I would agree.
And in general, it is something that you should maybe bring up in an interview setting. So I get that question a lot, and I don't know if that's something that, you've ever thought about either with like work and jobs. But I feel like a lot of people initially when they're going into an interview, they want to like impress, right? They want to get the job. I think it's so important to just throw out there the things that you're really you care about and the things that are important to you. And so if I was interviewing for a new job in the veterinary space, I would ask them, what is y'all's schedule? Does everyone have the same schedule? Are you open to people making a different schedule than the typical? And really see how they react to that. Because if someone said that to me, and they wouldn't even have to say it to me, because I would probably say, we're very open to making a schedule work for you. If someone said that to me, then I would say, yes, absolutely. Let's talk about like what your ideal schedule would be. We have to make sure it works for the team. But I do think it's something that, in one hand, if you are a small practice owner and you're competing against larger corporations that maybe have less flexibility in their schedule, it can help you. But it also just shows that as a group, you really care about your team and you care about making sure that people have a little bit better work-life integration than what typically has happened in the past.
I would also add that if you're the person that's interviewing, you're interviewing that hospital just as much as they're interviewing you. So if scheduling is a big part of something that you need to find out if that's a good fit for you as well.
Right up front.
Yeah. So again, I know a lot of people, like you said, interview to try to get a job and impress, but you're interviewing that hospital and that management team just as much as they're interviewing you. Especially
right now. I mean, I think 100%. I heard a crazy statistic the other day that for every open veterinary job, there's like 200 applicants, which don't quote me on that, but it was a number that was shocking to me. And so I think when you are competing against so many places, and especially if you live somewhere like us where there's a lot of veterinary hospitals right around the corner, you have to be able to stand out. And so creative scheduling can help with that. Now, when you get down to the brass tacks, how does it actually happen is really important. And so I think this is something I feel strongly about because I've done this. I was a part of a practice for a long time.
As a practicing vet and as an owner.
As a practicing vet and as an owner.
Yes.
Originally, though, when I was an associate, I was in a position where the original boss was retiring and they wanted me to come on and work full time and kind of be tapped as like the possible next owner of the practice. And so my contract was coming up. There was some things that we could discuss. And I honestly had like really good bargaining power. On the flip side, I had been working a lot. I had been doing relief on the side of my general practice job. And my daughter was going into school. And I really realized that I basically would get off work
That's
get
our
home.
daughter, by the way.
Oh, sorry. Yes, she's probably more yours than mine and how she acts and looks. But I would get home from work and basically we would feed her, throw her in a bathtub, throw her in bed. And like that was the extent of like me getting to see her on full days. And I really wanted to be able to spend a little more time with her and be a part of her activities. So when we sat down for contract negotiations, and you helped me with this, but we basically looked at the hospital and said, when are there times that the exam rooms aren't being used, that surgery is not being used by any of the doctors, and we could maybe make those areas more usable and more productive. And so I came up with a schedule where I left earlier in the day. I didn't take a lunch. We would normally take a 2-hour lunch. I forgone lunch,
Yeah.
forgo
Yep.
lunch. Okay.
Yep.
Excuse my
there's a
grammar.
word.
But I did not take a
Forgave?
2-hour lunch. We're going to have to
Forgave
look that
lunch?
lunch. No. No. I gave up my lunch. I gave up my lunch and instead was able to leave 2 hours early. Instead of doing surgery after seeing appointments in the morning, I did surgery first thing when other people were using the exam rooms. And then I saw appointments for a longer period of time through lunch. And basically, when I presented this to my boss, and he was always really great, I didn't say, I have to make this change. I said, I really think this might be great. Let's try it. And he was very open to trying it and then kind of circling back to see. And we quickly realized that it was going to be very successful. One, because we'd always been a practice that shut down for 2 hours over lunch, and pet owners couldn't get in there at that time for appointments. When we opened that up, people that had their lunches could grab their pet, could come up there and could be seen. It also helped out because we were able to add more surgeries in a day because I was using the surgery suite when originally it wasn't being used at all. So it really did help overall with my production, with the business as a whole. And I wasn't any less productive because I left a little bit earlier. If anything, I think I did even better because I was there working my booty off like the time period I was there. Now, the other part of that was making sure there was a supportive team at the same time with me. And he was a little worried about that. But as soon as I said, hey, if you work with me over lunchtime, you get to leave a little early, we actually had a list of technicians and we had to have them trade off days because they wanted to do that. And so that practice still now has, and they call it the Crocker schedule, and they have a doctor every day that does that schedule because it turned out to work so well. And so I think you have to think about it as a trial. And then you're really big about talking about blocks of time in a hospital and filling those spots. So why don't you explain that a little bit more when you're trying to think about creative scheduling?
Yeah, I think too often we think about, okay, we're open 8 to 5 or whatever. We've got to make sure that we have a doctor filling that block, right? So they're out there hiring for somebody that's going to work 8 to 5, 5 days a week, whatever it is. And I don't think that's really the case. You have a block of schedules throughout the day that you need a veterinarian to fill. It doesn't have to be the same veterinarian. It doesn't have to be the same technician. Those blocks just have to be filled. So how you put people in there is really irrelevant for the most part, as long as you can create it and everybody knows how to schedule to it, etc. So looking at it more as blocks that have to be filled as opposed to I need to hire one person to fill this 8-hour shift or 10-hour shift or whatever it is.
Right.
It's just kind of a different way to think about it, in my opinion.
And I think that it's not even blocks. It's also like surgery needs to be filled and the exam rooms need to be filled and drop-offs need to be covered. And so when you look at it in that way of the different duties that need to be done at different times, you can even dial it down even more. And you can either lean into somebody's strength. Like let's say somebody is an amazing surgeon and they want to hang out in surgery all day. Great. Let them come in, work a shorter day and do surgeries and dentals all day because you don't want to do those too late going into the end of the day. You need to make sure patients wake up from anesthesia and you can monitor them. But if they get in there and they're doing a ton of surgery, and who cares if they're not seeing a ton of appointments? Like as long as surgery's covered, then that's ideal, right? And so I think it's thinking about it more in that way versus we've always done this schedule. This day is the open day. So that's going to be your, day you have to cover. Pick another day you have off and that's it.
Yeah, I think if you think about the old practice you worked at, they had a really great schedule for a veterinarian, right?
Yes.
But it was created by them because that's the schedule that they wanted. They gave them time to go run at lunch, whatever they did. So just being flexible to say, okay, this doesn't fit this person's schedule. Let's find something that works. I think was very creative on their part because that was an old practice that had very traditional ways of doing things. But for them to be open to try something, I think was pretty, kind of outside the box.
Right. And I think that's why they continue
And this was, 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Maybe less.
No, it was about 10 years ago. And honestly, that's why they have veterinarians that work there. And that's why they've been able to make it work, because they've been able to adapt and change like with the times. And it is interesting because the more I looked into creative scheduling, there's industries now that are based around shift sharing, where instead of working your typical 8-10 hour shift, they break the shifts up into increments and people can take what works for them. And it really has helped, especially people that have a lot of responsibilities outside of work that don't fit with that traditional schedule, to kind of be able to still work and do what they really love. The other example I can give, which I think is great, is Dr. Staten, who owns a huge practice in Arizona. She actually requires her veterinarians to work a certain number of days in the year. She doesn't care what days they are. Obviously, they're general practice, so they're closed on holidays. They're closed on, I think, Sundays. But she says, you guys have to work a minimum of these days. You can work a little more, you can work a little less. Everyone has to help out with Saturdays, and basically says, you guys figure out what you want to do for a schedule. And as long as everything's covered, I don't really care. And so she's totally empowered her doctor group to sit down and say, this is what we want to do, and this is how we want to work out the schedule. And I love that too. I love that it's not somebody who's not actually taking a majority of those shifts, dictating what you have to do. It's really a collaborative experience for them to get together.
I will say, I think the key point there is that it's thought about and it's very intentional.
Yes.
And it's scheduled, right? If you have a traditional, you've got 5 veterinarians or whatever, and they all work this traditional schedule, you never really talk about it besides scheduling when somebody's off.
Yes.
With a creative scheduling, you really have to be intentional to schedule that probably a couple of months out so that you know that you have all your blocks covered. So that is something that's a little bit more time consuming for somebody that's responsible for making sure the hospital has coverage.
I would agree. Now, I will say, the way the world has gone, you have a lot of urgent cares and emergency clinics in a lot of areas now. And so I even know practices now that aren't even open 5 days a week, or they're open, we're open 4.5 days.
We own a practice that's not open 5 days a week.
You don't like to talk about that as a finance guy, but we are only open a half day Friday. I never would have thought that a small animal practice could be successful and not be open Saturday, Sunday, and be open a half day Friday. But we are, and we're busy, and we're making money, and we're paying everybody well. So I do think that, again, the idea of the more and longer we're open, the more successful we're going to be. Obviously, you add revenue, like the more days you're open, but you also have to pay more people to be there. And you also spend more money.
Yeah, and you also have the potential for burnout, right?
Yes.
So if there's something we can do to help with that's always a positive as well.
Yes. So there's a local cat hospital that is closed on Wednesdays. They're just not open at all on Wednesdays, and their clients know that, right? And there is the option for them to go to emergency clinics that are close by, and they know that. But I really think it's in how you set yourself up as a team, and you communicate that to clients, and you communicate your accessibility. And it's not going to work for every client. You're going to have some clients that say, I can only go see my vet on Saturday, or I don't ever want my vet to not be open where I have to go to an emergency clinic. And that's fine. There's practices for those people. But I do think you can niche down a little bit more and really focus on the type of clients that you want and offer a great experience when you are open, but not be as available, time-wise, and still be successful.
Completely agree. Not everybody's your customer.
Right.
So,
and I think a little bit about, we get a lot of questions about how to, compete against some of these corporate general practices and what they can offer. And I think, me being able to say, you're not working weekends, you're not on call ever, and guess what? You even get a half day Friday. That is huge.
Yeah, and we're kind of leaning towards the veterinarian here, but this is for technicians,
Yes.
This is for CSRs, this
Yes.
is for everybody really. We're
Yes.
pretty creative in how we schedule all the above.
So some of the main things are, culturally as a practice, you have to decide that you're all going to work together to cover the different areas that need to be covered when they need to be covered. But it's also not going to be that everyone has to have the exact same schedule. And it's okay because you're doing what works for you, right? Recently, I think it's also in your messaging and communicating as a leader group. So recently I checked in with our veterinarian and said, what else can I do for you? What else would help you out? Just make your job a little bit better. And she said, can we start a little bit earlier? And I honestly would have never thought that she wanted to start earlier. But there's some things and reasons why she'd like to get home earlier, and traffic and other things, at the end of the day. And so she's like, can we start a little earlier? Can I leave a little earlier in the day? And I said, if I have the team to help you start earlier, and of course, people are like, yes, I can start a little earlier and leave a little earlier. But we are going to be adjusting our schedule soon. And it's kind of been a nightmare to figure out how to block off spots and to do things on the actual schedule so that receptionists can do the messaging and the communication to clients. And we are going to have a meeting coming up to talk about that. And how do you say, like, I don't have a vet here, at the very end of the day for the last hour, and what is that messaging and what can we do and not do in that time period? But I do think it's really important to check in and to see what ideas your team has, and that it's not just always the owners or the leadership that are going to come up with these ideas. Sometimes they're going to come up with things that you might not have thought about that I think will end up being really successful still.
Yeah, I think the key here too is this is for us to try, right? Mm-hmm. It's not, we don't set anything in stone that can't be undone or, go to plan B or plan C. So I think the key here is to try something. And if it doesn't work, pivot and try something different.
Exactly. And this really does apply to large animal practices, mixed animal practices. More and more, I'm seeing them, make decisions about how much on call they'll do, who they'll do on call for, who covers it, who doesn't, and also how many days they're going to be open. Where originally they were seen as needing to be available 24/7, especially in areas that maybe are a little more rural. I know an equine practitioner, and she shares call with other single equine practitioners in the area. That used to be unheard of.
Yeah.
You used to not.
Everybody was scared, right?
Everyone was scared.
You're going to take my clients, as opposed to looking at it as, I'm great at what I do. My clients aren't going anywhere.
Right.
But I want somebody there to help them.
And I need a life. Yeah. Like, I need to not get burnt out. And so I like that people are thinking that way. And she works 3 days a week as an ambulatory equine vet. Owners love her. Like, she has coverage when she's not working. And it's allowed her to hire an associate who also is working 3 days a week. So, they have a little more coverage. But again.
So important point there for all the people that are thinking, man, I want to go get a creative schedule and only work 3 days a week, 6 hours a day. There's a trade-off for that.
Yes.
Right? If you don't work as long,
you don't make as
much.
100%.
So you have to prioritize what's important to you, but understand that you can't have, both, right? You can't make what you think you're going to make working 6 days a week and only work 3 days a week.
I agree. Well, I do think, so when I reduced my hours a little as a general practitioner, I still made enough, but that's just because I was at a point in my career where I was very efficient and I could do a lot of things as long as I had the manpower to help me. Yep. And I also was doing surgeries at a level that I made a lot of money off of surgery.
And that's a whole different conversation of working off productivity versus salary, et cetera. So, I mean, there's a lot that goes into this as well, not just necessarily when you want to work, but how you structure that contract and how you get paid, et cetera.
I do think, and this is a whole nother podcast to get into, but it is interesting to hear that there are, new graduates that are getting paid $120,000, $150,000 working 30 hours a week. And I don't know how those practices are going to make that money back. I find it really hard to see that. And I think it's happening more at corporate practices because I could not pay a new grad that, like, at this point in our hospital. But
there's a trade-off. I mean, you have to be in an area where clientele are willing to pay a lot more for the services.
Yes.
So you're basically passing that down to your clients at that point.
Well, or you are investing in them and saying, I'm going to help them grow and eventually this will pay off, which I think that's a whole nother conversation to get into about the generational changes. I got paid $60,000 when I got out of school. So I am not the best one to talk to about some of this stuff because it is very different from what I experienced a long time ago. So I do think that, the take homes are, it is good to talk as a team about these things. It is good to be open if that is something you want. It's good as somebody who's looking for veterinarians or new team members to maybe use this as a hiring tool and as a benefit of being in your practice. And ultimately, your clients can be trained to deal with whatever schedule you have. So if the messaging, the communication is clear by the whole team of this is what we can offer when, you're fine to not be available as much as a traditional veterinary hospital is. So that's what creative scheduling is, I think it's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, and I also think, you can be a veterinary hospital that's open 7 days a week, 20-hour days, whatever. Again, you just have to be creative in how you fill those spots. So we're not saying as a veterinary owner that you got to cut down your hours of operation or, not be open certain days. All we're saying is when you have employees that have the need to be off, find a way to make that happen. And there's a lot of value in it.
A lot of value, especially with the way veterinary medicine is changing, mental health.
I think this is going to be the new norm, to be honest with you. Not just in veterinary medicine, but across the board.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you look at just the jobs in general that are out there and what's being filled and what isn't, the more flexibility people have and the more they feel like they're valued, not just for the hours they spend at the hospital or whatever the job is, the more likely they are to be loyal to that place and to show up and to work really hard, even though they're not there as much. So I agree with you. I think that there's a lot to consider with it, but I have heard so many success stories about creative scheduling that I really feel passionately that it's something people should consider and talk more about, and be willing to help each other out as a team to make it work for everybody.
And again, we're not experts here.
We're not.
But you have done this as an associate vet.
Yes.
And we have done this as practice owners.
Yes.
So we've been on both ends of the bargaining table, discussing, trying to find ways to make this work.
And I would say from a business aspect, it can be really successful if it's done correctly. So if your culture will make it work well for the team, then I think it is something that you should consider in your next team meeting. Maybe talk a little bit about creative scheduling or with your next new hire. So if anyone has any more in-depth questions about this or any other questions about being a practice owner in veterinary medicine, about being an emergency vet, about being an entrepreneur, sharing the headaches of hospital renovations, we are...
I just saw a nasty slice right now.
What?
My golf swing.
Is that a golf reference?
It's bad right now.
Oh, is it? Sorry. I was sweating so much when we went that I couldn't even pay attention. All right. So Shane's going to get back to his golf game tomorrow. I'll be back at the hospital. And we look forward to your questions. If you have anything you want to ask us specifically, you can reach out to us on social media platforms at Questions with Crocker. We're also on YouTube. You can watch us there, and you can listen to us on Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts while you jog, walk, or just drive in your car.
Don't do it while I'm jogging.
If you want to leave a review too, that'd be great. As long as it's a good one, we appreciate it. And we appreciate all y'all's support. I've gotten some really great, wonderful messages. It's been fun doing this and just sharing more information as we go through this journey and we learn, and hopefully you learn a little bit with us. So have a great day, and thanks for listening.